We are in Judges chapter 8 today. If you want to get there and go there in your Bible, and continuing, I guess this is part 3 of
the end of the Gideon story.
the Gideon story.
He
Now,
dies at the end of the chapter. He dies.
Yeah, but
Well, there's a lot to happen first.
yeah. Well, not only that, but remember, we're kind of squeezing 9 too because
But Gideon's dead.
but
But his legacy is not.
the Abimelech. It's still part of the Gideon story. The part about Abimelech. We'll get to that. That's the next week. You'll want to stay tuned for that. But this is sort of the end of the battle, and then sort of the postscript.
The dysfunction that still remains all the way around. Gideon and the people show some unfortunate characteristics here.
So first of all, just so folks don't get confused, because there's a lot of names of people and places going on here. Let's just kind of talk a little bit about this first half of 8, where the Midianites are fleeing.
Yeah, this is the end of the Midianite conflict.
And but in the end of this, Gideon winds up having trouble with his own people.
Yeah. So the kind of the end. You kind of back in chapter 7. Everyone flees the camp, the army runs, and so while there's been a lot of killing, in fact, the numbers are kind of given here in chapter 8. They start out with 120,000, and Gideon will ambush what's left. I think it's about 15,000 men, if my memory serves me. Obviously a massive defeat for the Midianites. But so Gideon's chasing what's left back out of the region. And in hot pursuit, they go by the city of Succoth, and Gideon asks the people of the city to help feed his troops who are in hot pursuit of what's left of the Midianite force. And the people of Succoth, the officials basically say, no. Since you guys don't have
help.
Yeah, since you guys don't have Zavah and Zalmunna in your hands already, you're just wanting food, man. We don't see any productivity here.
and even before that, the chapter opens with the men of Ephraim, who are mad because Gideon didn't call them to go to battle.
Well, yeah. So let's and once is what you're seeing right here all the way around is across the board the dysfunction of the people collectively. Even when you have God raising up somebody to deliver them, there's a lot of selfishness, self-absorption, greediness. Lack of willingness to assist in the work that needs to be done, lack of unity. I mean, it's just one of those, kind of chaos. Even when it's not moral and spiritual chaos, there's just a lack of strong, even political, civil authority. Even when God raises up a judge, there's all sorts of disrespect, from the men of Ephraim to the men of Succoth. Just a mess, a social, political mess.
Well, and so that's interesting because the chaos in the nation and the division may contribute to what happens in
a line that's added. Yeah, a line that comes up.
Now, this is really important because it's the first time in Judges that this king issue is raised. And so verse 22, the men of Israel say to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your sons, also your son's son, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. And the response of Gideon, well, at least he says the right thing, right?
He says the right thing, but actions speak louder than words.
Well, here's what he says. I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over here. So let's just pause for a second and comment on that, because all through the book, there is this phrase, in that day there was no king in Israel. And I don't think that's just a political comment. If you go back to this first mentioned in verse 23, I think the idea is that not even Jehovah is ruling over them. And so the chaos is really rooted in the fact that they don't all honor God as king. If they would do that, none of the trouble would exist in the first place.
Well, it's one of those hard truths, which is why eventually, I remember reading a political, it was actually a foreign affairs journalist one time made the point. He's traveled the world, looked at stuff, and he said, anybody who thinks tyranny is bad doesn't understand anarchy. And he said there's a saying. He said 1 year of anarchy is worse than 100 years of tyranny. In other words, as bad as tyranny is anarchy, because
so much
anarchy, you don't, with tyranny, you know where the danger is.
Right.
Anarchy, you have no idea who might stab you in the back. And so, again, we don't think about that way because we tended to be, especially those of us who lived through the 20th century, totalitarian societies, tyranny's bad. But anarchy, and so, what you have here is just a complete lack of any kind of organizing authority that either the people respect and submit to, or that asserts itself on the chaos to bring righteous and just order back to the mess. And so the people, in one sense, begin to understand the issue. My always reminder when I teach on this stuff is, and there really is no human solution to this problem. Ultimately, it's what Isaiah talks about, especially in Isaiah chapter 9, in a messianic passage, basically, and the government will be on his shoulders, speaking of the Messiah. It's only when God, as the Son of David in flesh, Jesus of Nazareth, finally rules over a kingdom, that there will be a true authority that is righteous and just, and will insist on bringing order to those who will not submit to his righteous and just authority. So part of what Judges is doing here, and we begin to flirt with this a little bit here, right here, is the people have at least on some level recognized this can't go on. And Gideon's just done some pretty cool and good and useful things. And so
he's the flavor of the week.
Well, he's gone viral.
Yes. Yes.
We've all been, those of us who are of a certain age, we've gone through enough political election cycles where the front runner, a year out from the election is not necessarily the guy who gets the nomination.
Oh, yeah.
Is not,
Right.
And so, Gideon has just done something big. His poll numbers are up. And so, here come the people saying,
you ought to be the king.
This guy might be the guy.
Yeah, but by the way, and in asking that, don't look to Jehovah.
They look to him.
They look to him, and so it's actually his reminder here is important.
Yeah,
I was, as you were talking about that, I'm gonna divert down a path here and get off the subject that may get you off the subject too. But it seems to me that what's true nationally is also true individually, and that is, I think a lot of young Christians believe that they can really experience life and freedom if they can throw off the constraints of God and His Word and live life however they want to.
Right.
And the truth is, what they are choosing is the rule, rejecting the rule of God and choosing anarchy in their life.
Yeah.
And life doesn't get better when you throw off the rules and just do whatever you want to do.
No, because ultimately we are not gods. We cannot create our own meaning and purpose. We think that pleasure is meaning and purpose, but pleasure eventually gets tiresome. Which is why porn addicts eventually realize what satisfies today doesn't satisfy tomorrow. These pleasurable sins, these sins that are grounded in selfish desires and pleasures, that's why they always escalate, because pleasure cannot sustain long term. There is no true meaning and purpose in those things, which is why, because we are made to be image bearers and find an image and purpose, meaning and purpose in an image we cannot create for ourselves, but only in the one whose reflection we are. This will always end badly, either in, again, just annihilating ourselves and drink, drugs, promiscuous, some sort of addictive behavior, or just living in despair. But it doesn't work. Yeah, the spiritual anarchy that comes from refusing to submit to the King, who's also the Creator, ends badly.
Yeah. Easy to get you off topic, by the way.
Yeah, well done. Well, you knew what you were doing when you started this, man.
Yeah. Well, the theme for the year, and this is really, guys, where the theme we chose begins to factor in a very overt way, because this is the issue in the book of Judges, that we have this huge mess, and it all boils down to the fact that Jehovah's not the king.
Right.
And that's the way life is. That's the way culture is when Jehovah isn't the king. So he says the right thing,
but
in 23.
But
I'm setting you up here. I'm pitching you a softball. So go ahead and run with that.
Okay.
Because you don't like what's coming next.
No, so a couple of things. And while he says the right thing, actions speak louder than words. And there are two things to notice as we come to the end of the chapter. First of all is what happens in verse 27, where he makes an ephod out of the spoils. And ironically, we begin when we first meet Gideon. At the beginning of the story in chapter 6, he's tearing down Baal's shrine and ending the false worship. And now here we are at the end, and he's acting like a guy in charge who gets to set up worship for everybody. And, of course, people whore after it, as depending on your translation it says. So there's that. And so, but then there's the other thing that's even worse. Well, I say worse, I don't know, but bad, equally bad, which is when you get to 29 and following. So, and he knows his name Gideon goes away now. Now he's just the one that contends with Baal, because he's been the guy who is now re-engaging in idolatrous worship. And so Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring. 70. That's a lot of kids. No one wife does that. What do you need to do that? You need a harem.
Or he had many wives.
You need a harem. Who builds harems? kings do. And so he's got 70. And then there's also this other thing, verse 31, and he has a concubine in Shechem who bore him a son, and he named this son Abimelech. Now we just hear that and we're English speakers, but in Hebrew, Abimelech means my father is king. And this is the name that Gideon gives to this particular son, which is setting us up for next week, chapter 9. Gideon says the right thing, but then names one of his sons, my father is king.
My dad is king.
And then you read the rest of it, you know, I mean, and just it's kind of, you know, it's that's why Abimelech, as we get into chapter 9 then, thinks maybe I should live up to my name.
The dad is dead, and I need to be next in line, and we need to get this dynasty started.
That's it. And so Gideon says the right thing, but then names a son, my father is king. Wow. Wow.
So kind of the end of the Gideon story?
For the man, but not for the legacy.
Yeah, not for the legacy, because we're going to move on to chapter 9, and this son Abimelech is going to have his moment in the spotlight and just further illustrate the mess. So if you want to go back, as we suggested before, and read all of the chapters and, you know, just get the story, get thoroughly immersed in it, you can get that. But for next week, we will work in chapter 9 and pick up with the story of Abimelech.